Hey guys, Dan here with today's quarantine video. Hope everybody's staying safe and being well. So today we're going to talk about some of the movies that have been pushed up to be released for home viewing a lot earlier than anticipated because all of the theaters being closed. So all these have come up within the last week or so on iTunes and Amazon for purchase and all that kind of stuff, anywhere that you would normally buy movies, I guess, for your television. But one of these, The Gentleman, actually was only pushed up a little bit because I think it was supposed to come out in May for streaming anyway. But Sonic the Hedgehog, absolutely, that was pushed up. It just came out in February. So I think that was probably going to be more of like a summer release for home viewing. And then I Still Believe came out literally the weekend right before all of this started. So it only really got about 6 days in theaters before it got shuttered completely. So that is now available for purchase at home as well. There's a few other ones too that I will talk to at a different time. Bad Boys for Life, I wanted to give Bad Boys its own video because I've never actually seen any of the Bad Boys movies, so I'm gonna do a whole trilogy binging maybe tomorrow or something, and at some point this next week bring you a Bad Boys trilogy review video. So I'm saving that one, and then there's some that have just come up that we'll probably talk about next week. Call of the Wild with Harrison Ford is one of them, but anyway, we'll get to all of that. I also have a fourth movie today to talk about called Vivarium. And that is with Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots, and that just went up as well within the past week or so. So first we're going to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog, and actually the first two movies, Sonic and The Gentleman, I saw before the quarantine even happened. So like Sonic, I took my nephews to the weekend it came out, and Gentleman I saw I don't know, maybe a month ago or so. It was already at my second run theater at the time, so it had been out for a few weeks by then. But so these movies are not quite as fresh in my mind. But luckily for Sonic, I already have talked a lot about it because I did a video on my buddy Joe's channel about the movie. So I've already basically given it a review, so it's still kind of in my mind. But so anyway, the main plot of the Sonic movie is obviously it's taken from the video games, and he is basically an alien in this world. He finds himself in the Earth in our world, and he runs into James Marsden, who is a live actor in this and plays actually I guess everybody's pretty much a live actor in this except for Sonic, who's voiced, by the way, by Ben Schwartz, who I didn't recognize the name, but if you watch Parks and Rec, he plays John Ralphio. So, he sounds very, very different as Sonic, but that's who plays him. And James Marsden and Tika Sumpter play, the couple that he kind of falls into here in Green Hills, Montana, of course taken from the Green Hills Zone. And essentially, he sets out this electromagnetic pulse that goes and blacks out the whole nation, I think, or certainly at least the Northwest region, and it strikes some of the armed forces, and then we have Dr. Robotnik coming in, enlisted by the U.S. Department of Defense to kind of figure out what has happened, and he is played by Jim Carrey. So that's the basics of the film. I am not much of a video game person. I don't play a lot of like the violent games, the scary games like Silent Hill and that kind of stuff. That all has escaped me. But I mean, I know what it is, but like I don't really play them. But Sonic and Mario are my two like really, really big games that I always played. I mean, puzzle games too, like Tetris I loved and stuff. But, I mean, Sonic and I go back to the Sega Genesis days, the very first Sonic game, back in, I want to say, 91, maybe? It was a long time ago for sure. And this movie has been in the works for a long time. And, of course, they had the cartoon show in the 90s, and they keep releasing different Sonic games. And then once Nintendo bought Sega, then they could team Mario and Sonic up, and they did, like, the Mario and Sonic Olympics and all that kind of stuff. So, Sonic I'm a Sonic fan. Let's just say that, and I love Tails. You know, he's always been one of my favorites. So, you know, I just the whole world I enjoy, and I think this movie captures it great. I think they capture his character very well. I think Ben Schwartz is doing a great job with the voice. James Marsden is great here too, as the counterpart. You know, the yin to Sonic's yang. He's just a cop who's trying to sort of make a name for himself anyway. He's, you know, in talks to move up in the national ranks of the armed forces and stuff, and at the same time, you know, he's going through some marriage issues because of the separation, you know, because she's already sort of moved away to be where he's planning to work, but he's still in Montana, keeping things safe over there. And we have one of the Happy Endings dudes plays his, you know, his buddy at the police station. He plays Max on Happy Endings, Adam Pally. But Jim Carrey here is really the icing on the cake for this movie. He is having such a blast with this character. It reminds me a lot of when he did The Grinch. If you know me, you know I'm a big fan of the Jim Carrey Grinch movie. I know it is sort of it has mixed reviews. I don't think people hate it necessarily, but some people do, and then some people like myself love it. But this is the Jim Carrey mode that he's in. He gets in this sort of zone of like really immersing himself in this silly and ridiculous character. The humor that he provides is great. And there's I would say some actual genuine like tension within the plot here for young kids. I mean, I think there's definitely some stakes here, but we love Sonic immediately. Even if you've never played a game of Sonic, I think the creators of this movie made him so likable immediately. So not only are the Sonic fans already like, yes, I'm on board, I love Sonic, but even if you're taking like a 5-year-old to it who maybe is not familiar with Sonic, it's an easy entrance to loving this character and loving James Marsden's character too. You know, he comes off as, you know, sort of goofy but never stupid, you know, very sweet, good-hearted, but also intelligent. And so, you know, he helps Sonic to get out of some situations. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. My biggest gripe with it is the last third of it, from a real-world perspective, doesn't make any sense. Like, for example, they need to go to the top of this building to fight Dr. Robotnik, and they're like, oh, how are we going to get up here? And so they, like, lied to the woman in charge of it, and she's just like, oh, well, you don't really have, you know, ID. You know, they, like, plead their case, and she's like, okay, cool, like, go head up. You know, like, it just, like, stuff like that I know saying, like, oh, in the real world, Sonic the Hedgehog doesn't make sense. I know that's a little bit silly, but, you know, I like for movies, even if they're aimed at kids, to have some sort of, like, real-world consequences or real-world, you know, obstacles that they have to work their way around. And then this, like, the last third just didn't really make any sense in that regard. But this was a very fun movie. I really had a blast watching it. It was great seeing it opening weekend in a room full of families and kids and everybody laughing at it and stuff. You know, that helps it too. But I think it will play just as well at home for you guys that are going to be watching it on your TVs with on demand or over iTunes or whatever, you know, paying I think it's $20 to buy it. You don't rent it. I think it's $20 to straight up buy it. And, you know, I think you'll have fun with it too, but it definitely enhanced my experience, you know, being in that environment. Again, I'm not much of a gamer, so I don't have a lot of, like, it's better than, you know, X, Y, and Z video game movies, but I think it's the best video game movie that there's been. I definitely liked it more than Detective Pikachu by a good bit. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. Like, I've seen Tomb Raider. I saw that terrible Doom movie with The Rock. I never did see the 93 Mario Brothers movie. I heard enough bad things about that to stay away. But for my money, this is the best of the video game movies. I'm excited that it did very well and that there will be sequel, and I would say probably several sequels. And you know, it's worth noting that I really appreciate that the makers of this film listened to the audience when the first trailer dropped and saw the hideous looking Sonic and said, "This is horrible. Like, we're not going to go see this movie." Da, 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 da. And then they changed it to make him look more cuddly and less like an actual real life hedgehog. So you have to give them props for that too, for actually listening to audience demand. So I leave Sonic the Hedgehog with a B. I thought this was a lot of fun. Up next is going to be The Gentleman. This is a Matthew McConaughey, Guy Ritchie jam. Ritchie is the director, and McConaughey is one of the stars. It's actually a pretty good ensemble. You've got Charlie Hunnam plays, like, I guess the other lead, you would say, but Colin Farrell's in it. Hugh Grant is in it. Henry Golding, who has been popping up lately, he was the love interest in Last Christmas, and he was also the love interest in Crazy Rich Asians. He's not the love interest here, although, I mean, he does have a girlfriend, but essentially Matthew McConaughey plays a big marijuana grower and is trying to move on here with his crop and his acreage and his business, and is looking for buyers. And you know, if you've seen a Guy Ritchie movie, you know, you're not going to be really surprised about what happens in this movie or how it is, unless the only Guy Ritchie movie you've seen is like his version of King Arthur, which, by the way, was not that good. I thought it was pretty boring. I think I gave it a C minus, something in that range. I'm not actually. We weren't still doing the Film Fanatics show at the time, so I didn't review it here on the channel. But you know, just in my own personal grades that I wrote down, I think I gave it around a C minus or so. And also, Rock and Rolla, which Guy Ritchie did, I hate. I gave that movie an F. I thought it stunk. I thought he was trying way too hard to be Tarantino, which is sort of his thing. But in terms of his major 90s films, I believe Snatch is the one I've seen, which we watched on Film Fanatics. I believe it was Justin's pick, the 1 month. And I think that's the one we watched. I get that and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels a little confused because they came out right around the same time, and it was sort of like the Guy Ritchie 1-2 punch. But I'm pretty sure it was Snatch that I saw, which I enjoyed. I think I gave it like in the B plus range. I thought it was a lot of fun. This, to me, The Gentleman, skews more towards that than any of the other Guy Ritchie stuff I've seen before. So, yeah, essentially, Matthew McConaughey is playing Mickey here, and he has built this huge marijuana empire that he's looking to get out of the business. And so, you know, through a bunch of, you know, bribery, blackmail, violence, double crossing, all of that stuff that you associate with the Guy Ritchie, you know, sort of heist films or whatever of the late 90s, it is all here. You know, the Cockney accents and the over-the-top violence, and it is all actually very Tarantino-esque. I mean, you know, when I think about how Guy Ritchie must have really looked at Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction as sort of templates for what he wanted to do in his career, you know, the earmarkings are obvious. But that being said, this movie is a lot of fun, and you know, it's been since the movie came out that I saw Rock and Rolla, so I don't know, 8 years or more maybe. I don't really remember why I hated it so much, but I did. So where this succeeds and that fails, I'm not really sure. I certainly thought this was more engaging. I remember kind of being bored by Rock and Rolla. This is a lot of fun, and everybody is, you know, you're sort of rooting for different people at different times, and I think that's kind of one of the Guy Ritchie stamps as well. And he gets great performances here from a lot of actors that are really having fun. You know, is it a little too over the top? Yes, at times. Is it too long? Yes, this movie does not need to be. Is it 2 full hours? Let's see. This movie does not need to be. Almost. It's an hour and about 53 minutes. I don't think it needs to be quite that long. I think an hour and 40 would have cut it. There's a little too much double crossing and too much like there's so much going on. You have to really remember, like, okay, this character did this to this person, but it was like 5 scenes ago, so it's like, but in their world it just happened. So there's a lot going on, a lot of characters to keep track of, a lot of plots to tie together. But this movie was a lot of fun too. Not as fun as Sonic, and it definitely overstays its welcome a little bit, but people are certainly having fun with it. And McConaughey, I really got on board with the McConaissance, as it was called, when things like Magic Mike and Lincoln Lawyer and Bernie came out. And then there's been a couple of years where it's like he just hasn't been doing that much great work. Really after Dallas Buyers Club, because that was so great. And then, I don't know, the movies I can think of, like the movie Gold that he did wasn't all that great. Wolf of Wall Street he was okay in, although he was only in it for a little bit, but I think that movie is very overrated. Mud, of course, was excellent. That's one of my favorites of him. But let me just look at some of the recent McConaughey movies. Gold is the one I'm thinking of. Oh, he did that before I even look, I know. That Serenity movie with Anne Hathaway, and that was pretty rough. The Beach Bum I didn't see. White Boy Rick. Oh, actually, White Boy Rick was pretty good. I remember that. The Dark Tower was not bad. Free State of Jones was like okay. So, he's definitely been more hit or miss the last few years, but I think he's having a really good time here, and look, Matthew McConaughey always loves being over the top, and that's what these types of movies are about. And Hugh Grant has really found a renewed second career in being these sort of character actors, and sometimes they're villains, like Paddington 2. He was a great villain, having a lot of fun. Hugh Grant, I think, gets like, okay, I'm never going to be a romantic lead again, so let's just choose projects I think are going to be fun to make. And so he's just having a blast in this movie. Colin Farrell, I've really come around on the last few years as well. The acting's real good here. I think there's a little too much going on and it's too long, but other than that, I thought this was fairly enjoyable. So I leave The Gentleman with a B as well. Up next is I Still Believe. This is a movie that came out just a week before all the theaters got shut down. So, if you wanted to see this on the big screen, you can no longer do that. But you have your chance now at home. I believe this one is a $20 purchase as well on iTunes and Amazon. And then you can own it. And it's based on Jeremy Camp, the real-life Christian singer-songwriter, and it follows kind of in the footsteps of I Can Only Imagine. I think it might be from the same group of people. Yeah, they did I Can Only Imagine. They also did Mom's Night Out, Woodlawn, so, they have their stake in Christian films. They're called the Irwin Brothers. This one features KJ Apa, I think is how you pronounce it. He plays Archie on Riverdale as Jeremy Camp, and then Britt Robertson as Jeremy's first wife. I don't know if that leads into spoiler territory. I mean, look, if you're going to see this movie, you're probably already familiar with Jeremy Camp and his life story. But I still am not going to spoil things for you. So, all right. Basically, it just takes us through his life from, a struggling musician in college to meeting her, to, then finding out that she is sick with cancer, but they get married and he goes on to have this hugely successful singing career. And that's the basic plot. So let me tell you why this is so much better than I Can Only Imagine. First of all, the acting in I Can Only Imagine was horrible. Other than Dennis Quaid, who played the dad, but still, like, I don't know. I mean, Dennis Quaid hasn't made a good movie in a while, if I'm being honest. But here the dad is played by Gary Sinise, so, maybe an upgrade in this day and age, I'm not sure. But the acting is better just from the leads alone. I mean, KJ Apa, first of all, he's doing his own singing here, which I'm not sure if I Can Only Imagine guy did his own singing or not. I don't know, to be honest, but in any event, this is his own singing, so he doesn't sound exactly like Jeremy Camp. He sounds more like Archie from the show, but he does a good job there. And Britt Robertson, Hollywood keeps trying to make her happen. I don't think it's ever going to happen for her. She was in Tomorrowland, and she's been in a couple of these romantic dramas too. I think she was in a Nicholas Sparks one at some point. Was it the best of Me? Speaking of James Marsden, was it that one? I'm not sure. But anyway, she was in one of those. But look, I like Britt Robertson. I don't think she's going to happen in the industry. I don't think, I don't think Hollywood's right on this one. But I think she's a good actress, and, she does a pretty good job here. The other reason I like this movie better is that the story of I Can Only Imagine was basically dude comes from a broken home, his dad's abusive, retreats into himself, meets Amy Grant, writes I Can Only Imagine. The end, everybody wins, he sells, millions of records. Alright, that's fine. And I love the song I Can Only Imagine, but the movie was boring. This has actually a story. It has arcs for several of the characters. And it's not necessarily shoving the Christianity in your face. I mean, people that like Christian movies are going to go see this kind of thing regardless, because they're like, well, it's uplifting, gets the message of the Lord across, and that's fine. But I think there's a way to do it that's a little more subtle than kind of just throwing it in your face. And here we get this. I think these characters are all very realistic, and I think their faith is also very realistic, but not in a corny way and not in a, an over-the-top, like, in-your-face way. And granted, look, there are definitely some over-the-top Christians and all other religions, too. But here we get a more subtle approach, which is, to me, like the movie Breakthrough that was out last year with the gal from This Is Us and Topher Grace, where her boy falls through the ice. I really liked that movie, for what it was, a Christian movie. I think I gave it a B or a B minus, somewhere in that range. I mean, it was a positive grade. And I think there's a way to do this type of movie well, and I think this is it. I mean, is it telling us anything, completely new? No, I mean, it still hits a lot of the common beats for both music biopics and for religious movies, but it does it in a more engaging way, and I can applaud that KJ Apa is doing his own singing, even though he's not even American, so it's cool that he can sing as an American, let alone act as an American. But I think that's cool, seeing as how fans of Jeremy Camp will be like, well, he doesn't sound like Jeremy Camp. No, he doesn't exactly, but, I think he gets the point across, and he is a close enough resemblance. I mean, look, I only know about 2 Jeremy Camp songs, so I can't say I'm a fanatic, but, it seemed to get the job done enough for me. But overall, yeah, I mean, I thought for a Christian movie, this is certainly something watchable, even outside of the faith-based realm. So I still believe, with a C+. So finally is Vivarium, which stars Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots. This is the kind of movie that I think I probably never would have seen if it wasn't for the quarantine and, like, seeking out extra movies out there. Because I think there's a lot of movies that fall through the cracks every year, and when we were doing Film Fanatics every week and we were reviewing 4 to 5 new movies every single week, we caught a lot of these under-the-radar things, the indie projects, the straight-to-DVDs sometimes. So, I think we got a little bit used to seeing a lot of things that, in the last 3 years, I have not really caught up enough on. I've seen every so often some, that are recommended to me, or if they have a high Rotten Tomato score or whatever. But this is one where I was, like, looking up new movies that came out. I like Jesse Eisenberg. I mean, I go back and forth on him, but right now I'm on an upswing because Zombieland 2 was a lot of fun, and he was good in that, so I'm on an upswing with him. Imogen Poots is the other star of this movie, and despite her horrible, horrible name, she's done some interesting things, throughout her career. She kind of pops up just randomly. She was in, 28 Weeks Later, and, Pop Star, Never Stop, Never Stopping. She has a small role in, and she is one of the people in Green Room, which was great. So, I like the project she picks because she clearly picks things she's interested in. Not to slag on Britt Robertson any further, but, Britt Robertson, I think, is always kind of going for that brass ring of, like, okay, this is going to be a mainstream tentpole movie for the studio, whereas Imogen Poots, I think, is drawn to scripts that she thinks are going to be interesting, let alone, whether or not they're going to be hits. So, Vivarium is essentially a sci-fi mystery movie, maybe. I mean, it's not really a horror. There's a few horror or thriller elements to it, um, but I wouldn't classify it as such. Um, but basically, they play a young couple, Tom and Gemma, who are looking for their first home. So they meet this really weird real estate agent, and he drives them to this complex called Yonder. All the houses are exactly the same. They're this real weird shade of green, and he brings them in the house, and he's still acting very weird. And they started asking him some questions, specifically like, when are other people moving in here? And they turn around and he is gone. No trace of him, no trace of his car. And so they're like, well, screw this. Like, this was a weird thing anyway. Let's get out of here. And they can't. They are stuck inside Yonder. They drive around the complex all night, and they keep basically going in circles, driving past their house, number 9. And then, this will be the last thing I say of the plot, because I don't want to give spoilers, but then there's a young baby that arrives on their doorstep in a box, and a note that says, basically, if you care for this baby, you'll be free. So baby grows up at a exponential rate. After only about 100 days, the baby's like 8 years old. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about the plot. This is one of those really weirdo movies that sometimes take a little bit of extra digging or a little extra thinking about. This is the last one of all these 4 that I watched. I just watched it. So I'm still mulling it over a little bit. But because of doing Film Fanatics and talking specifically with my buddy Joe about some movies like Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal, that really... not Nightcrawler, I'm sorry. Nightcrawler was the one where he was the newsman. The one where he's like playing his own twin. All right, I am going to have to look that up because that's going to bother me. But it was from the same director, I think, of Prisoners, I think, and Nightcrawler as well, maybe. All right, was it? It wasn't Life. I remember Life. That was an interesting one. I actually enjoyed that movie. Look, I like this dude anyway. Enemy. That's what it was. Yeah, man. It was the one right before Nightcrawler. It was Denis Villeneuve who did Prisoners. He did not do Nightcrawler, but he did Prisoners with Jake Gyllenhaal. Anyway, the point is, it's taken me a little while to sort of take my palate and understand some of these movies a little further. It doesn't mean I always like them. I did not like Mother at all, the Jennifer Lawrence movie from Darren Aronofsky. I thought that was pretentious as hell. I didn't enjoy watching it. This is more like Enemy in that regard, where you're like, what the F is going on? What are these people about? What is the deal with this boy? Why can't they leave? Who's doing this to them? 100 questions. And I think a movie like this, you have to have a satisfying conclusion. I think after all of the stuff that goes into, like, okay, I've spent an hour and 20 minutes or an hour and a half with these characters, is the last 5 minutes of this movie going to satisfy me in a way that makes me not regret spending all that time with these characters? And it's a fine line, because it's the type of movie that's going to probably be very polarizing. For me, it was worth it. I really liked where they went with it. I think it's a couple of things. I mean, without giving spoilers, one of the ways you can look at it is certainly as a parallel or metaphor to sort of be careful what you wish for sort of thing, because you're, a young couple, all you want is, a home and a baby, and, what can that mean has a lot of different interpretations, and so it can be taken as a metaphor for sort of be careful what you wish for kind of thing. And then also, what sort of roles do we have as humans? because, right away Jesse Eisenberg's looking to get the hell out of Dodge and, trying to dig his way out, whereas her character is more trying to see what their world is now becoming, and she kind of cares for the baby, and she keeps reminding the baby, I'm not your mother, but she does care for it. So it's sort of talking about stereotypical gender roles as well. But other than that, the whole sci-fi component to it, and how this exists and what this all is sort of going to be more open to interpretation. But I liked this. I think my guess is this would have been better, though, as a 1 hour Jordan Peele Twilight Zone when he brought that show back. I'm not sure if this needs an hour and 37-minute movie, but I was riveted by it. I think the set design is very interesting because they chose specific colors for everything, and make sure all the houses were exactly the same, and the fences, and I think the art direction of this movie is certainly interesting, and I found it appealing. I liked Jesse Eisenberg in this. This was one of the Eisenberg movies I liked. I don't think it needs to be as long as it is, though, but I was satisfied with the ending. And I think they released it at the perfect time. I mean, it was scheduled to come out, I think now anyway, because it played at one of the film festivals fairly recently. Was it the 2019 something? Yeah, it played at Cannes last year, 2019. And it was released in theaters in countries that still have theaters, like Ireland, for example, at the end of March. So we got it basically to our homes at the same time. It was, I guess, supposed to be released in some indie theaters, maybe. But it's like the perfect movie for our time right now, because it is really, at its core, a story about how do two people that literally can't leave home and can't go anywhere, how do they cope with that? How do they cope with each other? How do they cope with this child that isn't even theirs? I imagine a lot of people aren't facing that particular problem right now. But it's it's just one of those movies. It's like the timing for this is perfect for people to see, and it's kind of what led me to watch it for my fourth movie this week. Anyway, just reading the description, I thought, well, this should be interesting for somebody who's quarantined here. I mean. And so it hit some notes there as well. So I really enjoyed Vivarium. Vivarium? I don't know how to pronounce it. It is a real word. I've just never seen it or heard it before. So I'm not sure how to pronounce it, to be completely honest. But what's the definition for it? Because I looked up the definition, because I didn't know if it was a real word or not. But the definition for it is an enclosure, container, or structure prepared for keeping animals under semi-natural conditions for observation or study. So, okay, like it's perfectly named movie. Yeah, I think this is one that, since we're all kind of stuck in the same boat right now, if you can handle a sort of surreal movie about that experience and where that leads with a sci-fi element to it, I think you'll enjoy this. I leave Vivarium with a B+. So that is going to do it for my movies this week. Like I said, Bad Boys for Life is going to get its own show. I'm going to watch the whole trilogy because I've never seen any of them, and we'll just review those all probably Monday. Mondays are usually kind of a dry day here on the channel, so I will probably do that. And then next week, like I said, I'm going to do Call of the Wild. I think The Boy 2... Brahms, The Boy 2 was just released as well for on demand. And then Friday, Trolls World Tour skips theaters entirely and goes directly to your homes for streaming and rental and purchase. So I'll have a review of Trolls as well for you next week. But be safe, comment below. Hopefully you've enjoyed these movies. These were all at least mildly positive grades. The worst one was a C+, so that's not too bad. So hopefully you enjoyed these movies as well, and hopefully you're staying safe. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.